Remikunle, Olakunle, and thank you, Abib, for giving that wonderful feedback and for appreciating our mentor. His name is Oluwatosi Ajala. He has been awesome all through this previous week. He has been amazing. He has really given us a lot, and we have learned from his knowledge. So before we get started, thank you, Remikunle. That was an amazing one. So before we get started, can we just drop our name and where we are joining us from so that we can just get to know ourselves before we start? I can see Philemon, Luca, Dandak, and I can see some other people. Just drop your name. I can see Valentine. Just drop your name and where you are joining us from. Yes. Okay. And welcome to today's section. So we'll be talking about implementing security for storage. And I'm so excited by privilege to be here, to be the person that will take this class, and I'm not taking it for granted. So I thank the organizers in the likes of Emmanuel Oyimafu, the top organizers and those putting all these things in place like John and Mercy. So I really appreciate you guys, and I appreciate every one of us also for joining. Yeah, let me see where we are joining us from. So I can see some people joining from Canada. Wow, Ibrahim Bolaji. Thank you, thank you. I can see Ibiodun Ekele. So, moderator, please, can you help us drop the reminder on the WhatsApp group? So those there will know that we are live. We'll soon get started. We have Matthias from Lagos. Yeah, Lagos are always winning. All the time. We always see people joining from Lagos. Lagos, 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 Lagos. Every day. So let's just keep it up. Let's keep it up. Yeah. I'll be sharing my screen so you can see the topic we have for today. Securing Azure Storage with defense in depth for cloud and AI resources. So we'll be looking at storage account security today, how we can secure storage accounts. So I can see Philemon Dandak joining from Abuja and Adeni from Benin City. That's nice. That's awesome. Thank you for making out time to join us today. We so much appreciate you. We have Adegbola from Lagos. Yes, thank you. Muyudin Oriola from Ilorin. Thank you. Thank you. From Osun State, we have Promise Ekele from Osun State. Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. So without wasting much time, so we'll just proceed to today's section of the bootcamp. And I'm happy to be here. And I know we are going to learn from each other today. So let me just go back to my slide so we can get started. Yeah. Okay. Let me get my pointer. So today we'll be looking at one of the parts we have for today, which is on XC500. Remember, the focus of this bootcamp is on XC500, which was a beta exam before, but now it is now live, meaning that once you write the exam, you're going to see your results immediately, and we can start preparing. For those of us that want to write the exam, this is actually a good time. Yeah, Jennifer, thank you. Thank you. So our topic for today is secure Azure storage with defense in depth for the cloud and AI workloads. And part of what we'll be looking at is how we can configure and secure Azure storage account using Microsoft Entra role-based access control, network controls, and how to enable Microsoft Defender for storage. Our amazing mentor, Oluwatosi Ajala, really took us on Microsoft Defender, how we can enable Microsoft Defender for cloud and protect our resources like key vaults, storage accounts, servers, and other resources, including AI workloads too. Today, we are going to be looking at enabling it basically for storage, how we can enable Microsoft Defender to protect our storage account. So my name is Oyimafu Emmanuel. I'm a cloud cybersecurity engineer. I work for DTS Solution. I do security operations on day-to-day activities, vulnerability assessment, infrastructure management. I also do like configurations of Microsoft security solutions and the likes. So that's me. So I have EZ9, EZ500 certifications, which is Azure Security Engineer, but it's so painful that Microsoft is retiring the certification. And now we have to go and write XE500, which I hope by the grace of God on my first attempt, I pass it. So this is what we are going to cover today. Secure Azure Storage with defense in depth for the cloud and AI workloads. So I'm going to go next. So if you have questions, you can drop the questions on the chat. So just like I made mention earlier, so in this particular section, we're going to be covering 4 modules. So at some point, I may be fast. So let's just bear with me. So at least we can make do with the sections and the time we have. And there is going to be hands-on time where we are going to go to the portal, see how we can secure access to storage account. I'm going to be explaining some of the features and the security settings that we can configure for storage accounts. And everything is aligned with XE500. Let's not forget. So if you want to be reading before any section starts, just go to XE500, Microsoft Learn. You are going to see everything we are covering. So far, so good in this bootcamp. Yeah, these are the learning objectives. So these objectives is to guide us because at the end of this training today, this is what everybody is supposed to understand. These 7 things are key things that you must understand at the end of this training. One, you must be able to compare Azure Storage Services, their tiers, and the redundancy option we have in Azure Storage. And you should be able to configure secure transfer and choose the right authorization model. You should be able to apply stored access policy and disable shared key authorization. Then we'll also look at how to apply firewall rules and virtual network restrictions. And number 5, we'll look at how to configure resource instance rules and trusted service exceptions. And we'll see how we can implement private endpoints for Azure Storage and enable and configure Microsoft Defender for storage. So this is the last thing we are going to do. So at the end of the day, if you have this learning objective in your mind, so if maybe there's a part that we did not cover very well, or there is a part that you have questions to ask, it can be easier for you to know, okay, this part, I'm missing it, and I want to ask questions based on this part. So I'll just continue. So these are the prerequisites. Just like our mentor always say, Oluwatosi Ajala, XE500 is not a pure beginner's course. It is actually an advanced course for people that already have knowledge of Azure role-based access control, Azure Entra ID fundamentals, how to navigate the Azure portal, general security fundamentals such as zero trust principles, least privilege, auditing, and secure configuration, basic cloud and networking knowledge that spans across VNet, subnet, private endpoints, firewalls, and NSG, and also familiarity with Microsoft Defender for Cloud. So everybody on this call, we are not novice anymore because Oluwatosi Ajala has took us through Microsoft Defender for Cloud. At least I was in the class. I saw how he took us to Microsoft Defender for Cloud, showing us how to enable workload protections, showing us how to turn on Microsoft Defender CSPN, and now we can configure compliance in Microsoft Defender for Cloud. And he also covered some parts. And in case maybe you don't know what Microsoft Entra ID is, you don't know what role-based access control is, my advice is that last year we did a bootcamp on XC300. You can just go watch those sections. Believe me, you are not going to be lost because most of the mentors there really did a very good job to explain Azure role-based access control and Entra ID fundamentals properly. So it's going to be a nice one for you to go back and watch. So I can see somebody saying that some stuff here look similar to AZ104 stuff, right? Yes, it looks similar because actually what this course is all about is securing access to cloud storage. So basically, like I always tell people, before you secure anything, you are supposed to know what you are securing. In AZ104, there is a part that covers storage account, where you see how to manage storage account, how you can upload files to a blob, how you can do most of the storage account operations. So basically, AZ104 is supposed to put you through most of the administrative tasks of a storage account. Now, what we are doing here in XC500 is securing storage accounts, meaning that you are supposed to have fundamental knowledge of what storage account is first before you should be able to secure it. So, but don't worry, I'm going to try my best to cover most of the administrative tasks you will do in terms of storage account management and also how to even create storage account from the portal. We're going to see all that live. Yeah, thank you, Promise Odogu, because I don't know how to pronounce your name, whether it's Ibi Diogun. So let's just say Promise Odogu. So thank you very
That's
much for that.
correct. That's correct. Ibediogu, that's my name.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, so like I made mention, so we have 4 modules we are going to configure. After the training, I'm going to be sharing the slide so that we can look at the slide. So if we look at this here, this modules covers the 7 objectives that we are going to cover for this section. So module 1, describe Azure Storage Services. So this Azure Storage Services is under AZ104 learning part. So this is where you learn all this. We are going to look at implement security and manage access, secure transfer settings, authorization models, disable shared key via Azure policy, and we also know what Azure policy is. Azure policy is used to control your environment to prevent specific actions that you don't want people to perform. Example of Azure policy in a house setting is there are some parents that have specified a rule in their family that nobody should come back home 7 p.m. That means if you are coming back home 7 p.m., sleep where you are. Don't bother to come to their house. So that is their own policy. So in Azure, you can also create policy that you don't want people to create resources in a particular region. So meaning that you can use Azure policy to automatically disable shared key. That means in your own environment, you don't want anything like shared key. I know the concept of shared key will be strange to us, but don't worry. As we proceed, you're going to understand it by the grace of God. So we'll look at configure network security, how we can use firewall and VNet rule to restrict access to our storage account, which is very important because if you enable access to your storage account wide, meaning that you are increasing the attack surface, what that means is that everywhere, everybody from different places can access your storage account because it is wide open to the general public. But if you maybe use private endpoints, or you use specific virtual network, that means you are reducing the attack surface. So we are going to look at all that, and we are going to see how we can implement Microsoft Defender for storage. This Microsoft Defender for storage is expensive. So I will only show us, okay, this is how we'll do it, but I may not enable it in my own environment because I don't want my subscription to finish. Like our mentor always say, Oluwatosi Ajala, nothing is free in Azure. You pay for everything. Nothing is free, and it's right. Anything you want to do, you pay for it. Yeah. So we'll continue. So now let's look at what is Azure Storage Account. So for those some of us that are familiar with for some of us that are familiar with AWS, AWS have their own storage account, but it is called S3 bucket. S3 bucket. So in Azure, the storage account is called what's used to store files, blobs, and file blogs and tables is called storage account. So what is a storage account? A storage account here is a unique namespace in Azure that contains all your storage objects. Storage objects. Example of storage objects, we have files, we have blobs, we have tables, and we have queues. So for blobs, you can store unstructured data like video, pictures, and many data types as it may be. So storage account is a unique namespace in Azure that contains all your storage data objects. So each object has its own address that includes the name and the combination of account name plus service endpoint that forms the URL. So basically, a storage account for short is used to store data objects in Azure. We have different storage medium that you can use to store files in storage accounts. One, we have Blob. You can store your files using a Blob. You can store using file share. You can store using table, and you can store using queue. So when I demonstrate creating storage account, I believe it's going to be very easy for us to understand. So, but let's just understand that storage account comes with service endpoints. When we say service endpoints, we know that storage accounts now, as the case may be, it is used to store files, pictures. An important use case of storage accounts is maybe, for instance, I have my website. So in my website, let's say I have some picture. Maybe my website is an e-commerce website where I store pictures. I have pictures, catalogs of things that people can make order and buy. So those pictures, I can be storing those pictures in a blob storage. So if those pictures are in the blob storage, my developers, people that are building the website for me, need access to where the pictures are. So for them to get access to where the pictures are stored in my storage account, that is where the endpoint is needed. So all I just need to do is to give them the blob endpoint. So with this endpoint, they can connect to my storage account and have access to the pictures that are in that storage account. That is an example of endpoint. So in terms of storage account endpoints, we have four. We have blob, we have files, we have queue, we have table. So let's take note of the address of the endpoint. So the first is the name of the storage account. So the name of the storage account comes first, before blob, before core, before Windows, then .NET. So basically in exam, like those of us that want to write AZ104 or XE500, this question always comes out. They will ask you, okay, can you complete the URL? What's the full URL for Blob? So it starts with the account name, then the storage type you are using is if it's Blob, then .core, .windows, .net. Same for files, same for queue, same for table. So Blob now, one important thing we need to understand is that Blob, you can use it to store files like pictures, videos. You can use it to even store executable files. Like you can use it to store executable files, like maybe you have some installation files. You can use Blob to store those installation files. While for files, so these files now, it works with server message block like SMB. It works with SMB protocol. So what that means is that it works like your system. Maybe maybe you have a space in your system where you can access files. So so for files in storage account, it gives you option to create directories, just like you have directories in your system. So you can create directories for customers, for different use case, and you can store objects in those directories. So we have queue. So this queue now is used to store, maybe you have applications like, if you are not muted, kindly mute your mic. So let me check who is this person that is not muted. So when joining the meeting, please mute your mic because you are distracting us. You are distracting us. Okay. So that's for queue. It's used to store alerts. While for table is used to store structured data. Structured data. So blob, you can use blob to store unstructured data. You can use files to store unstructured data. Queue is used to store alerts, while tables is used to store structured data. If we look at the key characteristics of what Azure Storage Account is, one, it is durable and highly available. So this is one of the key characteristics of Azure Storage Account. It has redundancy that protects against hardware failure. The options range from single data center, which is local redundant storage, to cross-region, which is geo zone redundant storage. So when we get to the redundancy option, we're going to cover this. But let's just know that one of the key characteristics of a storage account is it is durable and highly available. And by default, it is encrypted. A storage account is always encrypted by default. All data are encrypted at rest with AES 256 and cannot be disabled. So let's take note. All data are encrypted at what? At rest. So it is encrypted by default. So we have massively scalable. So it is massively scalable, which means that it can scale to meet your business demands. So you can scale up, you can scale down, and it is globally accessible. It is reachable over HTTPS from anywhere. So if you have client applications that was deployed using .NET, Java, Python, Go, and REST API, you can give access to you can give access, you can give your storage, you can give your application access to your storage account using any of this programming language, if that's what you use to configure your account. So we'll proceed. So to come back again, a storage account is a unique namespace in Azure that contains all your storage data. So once we get to the portal and we create a storage account, we are going to see how we can access all these data and how we can add files to this data. I'm going to be showing us on the demo sections. So if we proceed, so we now have why public access is wrong. So why public access is the wrong default for storage account. So if we look at the common anti-pattern, like public blog access left enabled by default. So if you enable public blob access on your storage account, what that means is that you are increasing the attack surface. You are exposing your blob access to the general public. And in that case, it will be difficult for you to even control it because the attack surface is very wide. So one way that you can use to protect against this common anti-pattern is to disable public network access by default. So if you have blob in your, if you have, maybe you have created some blobs and the access is left enabled, if the public access is left enabled by default, so it's better you disable it. And I'm going to be showing us how we can disable public network access on our storage account. So we can see another problem, which is shared key use for every application. So instead of you to be using shared key, your access key for your application, so it's better you use Microsoft Entra ID and role-based access control for data access, because this will help you streamline your authentication using Microsoft Entra ID, which is best practice. So the next common anti-pattern is no firewall or virtual network rule. So there are some environments that their storage account is just left open, like is left open. Anybody can access it because there's no firewall. So in that case, apply firewall rules and private endpoints. So these are the common anti-patterns we have in terms of storage accounts. The next is access key embedded in app config or code. So it is not good you embed it's not good you embed your access key in your app config or code. During the demo, I'm going to show us I'm going to show us how we can have access to our access key and why this access key is very important and why it is not good for us to embed it in our app or config. So I see your hand raised, Isaac. Just hold on. Let's proceed. After the class, I'm going to call everyone to ask their question, because if I attend to your question now, we are going to have delay and we have a lot of modules to cover. So I'm going to answer your question. So the next you can do in terms of if you are using access key embedded
It's
in
not a
app
question.
config,
Your slide is not moving. It's not a
yeah,
question.
Yes, sir. Your slide
yeah,
is not moving.
yeah,
Hi,
we are
yeah, your
still
slide
in.
is not moving, Oyimafu. Okay,
Okay,
yeah, we are still on the first slide.
I'm still on the first slide, which is why public access is wrong. Is that what you're saying?
No, no, no. What is an Azure Storage account? That's where the foundation.
Okay, let me stop sharing and reshare.
Thank you.
Should I turn off my camera so that my camera will not be consuming much of the network? So can you see my screen now? Is it better? Can you see common anti
Still coming up.
Okay.
Still coming up.
Okay, how is it now? Are you seeing the screen where I am? Like, why public access is the wrong default for storage?
Still here
We
to
can't
see
see
it.
Okay, yet to
Still
see
coming
my
up.
screen.
Still coming up. I think your network is delaying it. Maybe.
It's probably just turn off the camera from your end to reduce the bandwidth usage. Yeah, fine.
Let me stop sharing.
Probably we should, yeah.
Let me reshare. Okay, what about now? Can you see my screen? Is it better now?
No, it's still coming up.
Okay.
Yeah.
Not up yet. Okay.
No.
I guess I should let me change my network. Let me change my network. Hello, is my voice audible? Hello, can we hear me?
Yes. Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, let me reshare my screen again. So what about now? Can you see my screen?
Content is loading. Yeah, it's visible from here.
It's clear now.
Yeah. Yeah, it's visible now.
Okay. So these are the common attack patterns if you enable public access. And it is wrong because if you enable public access, that means you are increasing the attack surface, just like I made mention earlier. And it is not good to increase your attack surface because if you increase the attack surface, it will even be difficult for you to even protect your environment. So another example is shared key used for every application. So instead of using shared key for every application, it's better you use Microsoft Entra ID and role-based access control for data access. And also, if some environments don't have firewall or virtual network rules, which is wrong. So the best practice is apply firewall rules and private endpoints. So the next is access key embedded in app config or code. So instead of you to embed your access key in your app config or code, so it's better you use key vault. So I remember our mentor, Oluwatosi Ajala, took us on key vault, how we can store secrets in the key vault. So an example of secret you can store in the key vault is your access key. You can store your access key in the key vault because it's a very big secret. And we're going to see why access key is a very big secret, because if somebody have access to your access key, they have access to your entire storage account, everything in your storage account, including the table, the files, everything completely. So to make the training interesting, so I'll share my screen so that I can walk us through how we can create a storage account from the portal. So let's just continue. So storage account exposure attack chain. So if you expose your storage account, these are the attack chains that you are exposing your environment to. So public or legacy access is when storage account allows public network access or shared key authorization. So if you allow public or legacy access, what will happen is your credentials will be discovered. Your account key or SAS token will be leaked via repos, logs, or memory dumps. So that is why it's not even good for you to allow public network access or shared key authorization. Because if you do that, your account key, SAS token will be leaked via your repo. So repo is like the Microsoft Naija Security User Group now. We have our repo where we upload our assignment. Imagine maybe somebody go and upload maybe their BVN or or let's say their credit card number there. So with that, if somebody have access to it, they have access to your account. If you if someone have access to your BVN now, so BVN, you can compare BVN to this account key. Because if somebody has access to your BVN, they have access to all your accounts. They can withdraw all your money in all your bank account, depending on the application that the person has access to. So the same thing with account key. So with account key, you have access to the whole storage account. So after the credential is discovered, what will happen? Privilege reuse. So the keys or token grant direct access to the container files or queues, just like I said earlier. So the account key gives access to your entire storage account, your containers, your files, your queues, and even your table. So that's why public or legacy access to your storage account using public network access is not good. So this is the impact that is going to bring: data exfiltration, ransomware overwritten, or lateral movement via exposed secret. Remember, your account key is a very big secret because it gives access to your entire storage account. So that is why if it is exposed, you could face this impact, like data exfiltration. Your data is going to be exfiltrated. Ransomware could be overwritten. Lateral movements via exposed secret. So those are the exposure that we need to prevent. That's why it is not best practice for us to allow public network access or shared key authorization. At least with this, we know why we are actually in this class. So now we'll look at what a default storage account exposes. So as it is here, we have 3 doors that are open until you close them. So if you close anyone, it reduces the blast radius of the other 2. So these are 3 doors. Imagine you close your network by preventing public access. That means you are reducing the effect on these 2 layers. So for network layers, public endpoint means your storage account is reachable from anywhere. But if you enable private endpoints, that means you are enabling private access to your storage accounts. So by default, no firewall, no IP, no VNet restrictions. Anyone on the internet can attempt to reach the data plane. So what this means is that by default, once you create your storage account, public endpoint is enabled by default. So every account gets public DNS. Your Blob, your table, your files, it gets public DNS. By default, no firewall. So we are the admins. We are going to be the one to configure all those firewalls and restrict access. And that's why we are here today, so that we can do all that. So for identity, shared key authentication with no rotation policy. So if you have rotation policy for your shared key, it will help, because maybe at 3 months, the key can rotate so that access will be revoked. So that's an advantage of rotation. So we have data. So anonymous blob data access may be permitted. So what this means is that anyone can have access to your blob if anonymous data is enabled. Anonymous means anyone, which is not good. So if enabled at the storage account and container level, no credential needed to read blobs. So anybody can just connect to read your blobs, which is not best practice. So disable by default on new storage account. So just like our mentor taught us, so you can use Azure policy to disable anonymous block access when you are creating new storage accounts, so that anytime anybody in your team is trying to create storage accounts, it's going to stop them that, okay, you have to disable this because our policy does not allow you to do that. That is one use case of Azure policy. So these doors needs to be closed. So if you have storage account existing now, go and check. If you don't have any firewall or network rules, restrict it. Ensure that you don't expose it to the public. Ensure anyone on the internet cannot reach your data plane, because it's very important. Because if anyone on the internet can reach your data plane, it means that you are giving people access to run attacks on your environment, which is not best practice. So it's better you reduce those things. Just go. So this is data plane versus management plane. So for data plane, you can control it by firewall. For management plane, it's not blocked by firewall. So in management plane, these are some settings you can configure. You can configure, create, delete, or configure the storage account. You can change the firewall rules, encryption settings, role-based access control, rotate keys, gated by Azure role-based access control and not by network rules. So these are just example of management plane that are not blocked by the firewall. So the next is data plane. So for the data plane, it is controlled by the firewall. So for somebody to have read, write, list, delete access to your files, you need to control it from the data plane using shared access signature, which is what we are going to talk about to prevent upload and download operations. So we are going to see how we can control all this using shared access signature, and we'll look at AZ copy, SDK calls, storage explorer, data views, then how we can use REST and SMB traffic for storage endpoint. So let's not worry. Once we get to the demo, it's going to be easy for us. So these are the redundancy options we have for storage accounts. In the first slide, when we're talking about a storage account, we were like, storage account is very reliable because it has redundancy options. So these are the redundancy options that comes with a storage account: LROS, ZROS, GROS, and GZROS. So for LROS, it is local redundant storage. So what this means is that your data is in a single data center. It copies your data 3 times within a single data center. If your workload is highly critical, this is not best practice, because what it means is that if that data center fails or anything happened to that data center, you won't be able to access your storage. That's the disadvantage of local redundant storage. From the name local, it means that it is streamlined to a local data center. That is the meaning of local redundant storage. That means if anything happened to that data center, your storage your access to your storage account or your data you won't be able to access them at that time. But if you want to use zonal redundant storage, that means you are going to pay more. Somebody using local redundant storage will pay lesser than somebody using zonal redundant storage, because for zonal redundant storage, it copies your data across 3 availability zones. 3 availability zones are 3 different zones, meaning that if anything happens to one zone, you have rest of mind because your data is not just only in one availability zone, but it's in 2 other availability zones. But for local redundant storage, if anything happens to that data center where your storage is, that means everything is gone. So for geo-redundant storage, this one gives you asynchronous replication to a secondary paired region. So those of us that have done Azure fundamentals, we have what we call paired regions, region pairs in Azure. So with geo-redundant storage, that means your data are being replicated to a secondary paired region, meaning that if anything even happened to the region where your database are hosted, because of the region pairs, you are safe. But the more you go, the more the money you spend. That's just for this redundancy option. But most times in your own environment, always go for local redundant storage because it's the cheapest. So in terms of access tier, we have 4 access tier here. We have hot, we have cool, we have cold, and we have archive. So for hot, you use hot access tier when the data you are trying to access from the storage account is frequently accessed. Like for frequently accessed data, you use hot access tier. While for data that you don't access frequently, you can use cool. For data that you rarely access, that is rare for you to access it, you can use cold. Then for the ones that you don't even need to access it, you can just archive it. So it can be offline. It can be offline. But the disadvantage is that if you want to bring the data back so that you can access it, it takes hours to rehydrate. That's one thing we need to take note of. So most times it's good you just put your data on cool, except if you know that that data, you may not need it for a very long time. So we'll just continue. So now we look at Azure Storage Services at a glance, just like I made mention earlier. So we have Blob storage, we have Azure Files, we have Queue, and we have tables. So for Blob storage, it is a massively scalable object store for text and binary data. It supports data lake storage for big data analysis. One of the use cases is you can use it to store image, videos, backup files, logs, and ML training data. So you can use it to store all these files. Yeah, somebody just dropped a question. Retrieving data. If you use archive, it's more expensive to retrieve data because of the cost of because of the rehydration it comes with. Yeah, thank you very much for that. So for Azure Files, it is fully managed SMB and NFS file shares. It is mountable from cloud or on-premise resources. So part of our demonstration, we are going to be creating a file share and we're going to see how we can mount it. So we need to be very fast so that we can meet up with everything we have. So we have queue storage, which is a reliable messaging system between application components via HTTP and HTTPS. So a use case is sync track processing, order pipeline, and decoupled microservices. So that is what you use queue storage for. While for table, it's a NoSQL key attribute store with schemaless design for structured data. So you use table to store structured data, but it doesn't have any schema designs like MySQL or SQL. So this one doesn't work with schema. It is schemaless. No SQL key. So one use case is IoT telemetries, user profiles, and device metadata. So just go. So these are the blob types. We have block blobs, we have append blobs, and we have page blobs. So the reason why I'm taking my time to explain all this is I want us to, like those of us that are not familiar with the fundamentals, it can be easy for us to actually get all this. So for block blobs, the common use cases, it is for general file storage, for image, docs, for media, for static website hosting, for data lake storage and the likes. So if, for instance, you want to create a blob, so with the use case, that will tell you, okay, what kind of blob should I create? Should I go for append blob? Should I go for page blob or block blobs? So depending. So for page blobs, the common use cases is Azure VM OS and data disks. So if you want to store Azure VM and data disks, then you use page blobs. So all these are scenarios that could come up maybe during a client's conversation with a customer. They can just ask you. So file movement. So what file movement means is that if you want to copy file from one storage account to another storage account, so there are tools that you can use. You can use Easy Copy, you can use Azure Data Box, you can use Azure Migrate, you can use Storage Explorer, and you can use Azure File Sync to copy files from one storage account to another storage account. So we can see here we have Easy Copy. It's a command line utility for high performance copy to and from Azure Storage. It supports blobs and file copy. For Azure Data Box, this one is used for physical devices for offline bulk data transfer to Azure, meaning that if you want to transfer physical data if you want to transfer data from physical devices, then you use Azure Data Box. So it is available in Data Box disks. So we now have Storage Explorer, which is a cross-platform GUI tool for managing Azure storage data. You can use it to upload, download, and manage blobs. So for Azure Migrate, it is a unified migration platform for discovering and accessing and migrating on-premise resources to Azure. So if you want to migrate on-premise resources to Azure Storage, then you use Azure Migrate. It integrates with Azure Data Box for large-scale data migration. And here we have Azure File Sync, which is a centralized file share in Azure Files. So we just go. So this is an authorization method by storage account. So for Blob, you can use shared key to access Blob. You can use shared access signature. You can use Entra ID, but you can't access it using on-premise ADDS credentials. It also supports anonymous access. File storage does not support anonymous access, but it supports on-prem ADDS. It supports Entra. It does not support shared access signature. That means if you are configuring shared access signature, you can only configure it for Blob, for files, for queues, and for table. File share is not supported for that. So let me just change so I can charge. Okay. So I need to stop sharing my screen so that I can, yes, this is screen only. So let me go back to reshare. Okay. Okay. So I'll share my screen again. So if you can see my screen, kindly let me know. So can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. So these are the authorization methods that you can use to access your data. You can use to access your data options in storage accounts like Blob, files, then queue and table. We can see here for files, we have SMB, we have REST, which is if you want to access it using REST APIs. So if you want to access your file share using REST APIs, then on-prem is not supported. Anonymous is not supported. The only one supported is Entra, SAS, and shared key. So those are the things we just need to put in mind. So we'll continue. So we'll just skim through the whole presentation so that we can look at, we can go to the lab. So for identity-based authentication for Azure files, so Azure files support 3 identity-based authentication methods over SMTP. One of the methods are on-premise ADDS. So if your environment have on-premise ADDS, then you can use this method to connect to Azure files. But there are some requirements that you need, like you need an existing ADDS infrastructure. Devices must be joined to the ADDS, to the Active Directory. Then there must be a line of sight to the domain controller, meaning that you need to configure like virtual network gateway that establish a site-to-site VPN that connects your Azure environment to your on-premise environment. That's the meaning of this line of sight, so that the Azure can be able to communicate with your domain controller back and forth. So we have Microsoft Entra services, like here we have Entra Domain Services. So if you're using Microsoft Entra Domain Services now, this one is cloud only. It is not actually like ADDS where you manage everything in the cloud. So Entra service join devices. There are some devices that are joined to Entra ID. Like if you are using cloud only, you can join your devices to Entra ID. So part of the requirements are no on-prem infrastructure. If you want to use ADDS connection, then you need on-premise infrastructure. But if you don't want to use ADDS, you want to go for Microsoft Entra ID service, then you don't need that. So for Microsoft Entra Kerberos, this is for hybrid identities, when your devices are joined to both your Active Directory domain controller and Entra ID. So this one doesn't need line of sight to the domain controller. So you don't need line of sight to the domain controller, meaning those networking features, you don't need to configure them. I'm going to be showing us in the portal. So we are just going to jack into the Azure portal so that we are going to see all these things in play. So let me log into the Azure portal. So let me go to, so this is Azure. So I'm logged into Azure portal. So this is where you create the resources that you want to use in Azure. So today we're talking about storage account security. So I'm going to show us how we can create a storage account from Azure portal. So if you want to create a storage account, then on the search resources and service docs, let me see if I can, okay. On the search resources and service docs, you will just type storage account. Okay. So once you type storage account, in my own environment, I already have 3 storage accounts. But in your own case, you may not have any storage account. So you can just click create to create a new storage account. So I'll just click on create. So first thing first, if you are creating your storage account, you need a subscription. You need an Azure subscription and you need a resource group. So I'm going to be creating a new resource group so that at the end of the class, I can just delete it. So I'll just say MS Naija XC 500 Bootcamp. So I'll give my storage account a name. Let's say MS Naija Bootcamp. So for the region, I'm going to be selecting a region that is close to me. So South Africa is okay. I'll just leave it as South Africa North. So for primary service, so if you have a primary service in mind, maybe you want to create a storage account for Blob alone, for files alone, for table alone, then you can select the primary service. But in this case, I don't have any primary service, so I'll just leave it as default. So the next is performance. So for performance now, you can go for standard or premium. But if you go for premium, the cost is more. If you go for premium, it's recommended for scenarios that requires low latency. If you want high retrievals of your files, then you go for premium. So this one is recommended for most scenarios. So I'll just go for standard. So for redundancy, just like we were explaining the other time. So if I collapse redundant storage now, we can see all those options that we have on the slide. Local redundant storage. So this local redundant storage now, it is the lowest cost options with basic protection against server rack and drive failures, recommended for non-critical scenarios. So what we are doing now is a non-critical scenario because we're just doing a demonstration. So the next is geo-redundant storage. This is intermediate options for failover capabilities in a secondary region, recommended for backup scenario. So if you want to use your storage account for backup, then you use geo-redundant storage because this options is recommended for backup scenarios. So the next is zone redundant storage. This one is the immediate options with protection against data center level failures, recommended for high availability scenarios. So remember this one, if there's data center failure, that means you won't be able to access your storage data. But for zone redundant storage, even if there's data center failures, you'll be able to access it. So this geo now, this is very expensive. Optimal data protection solutions that include the offering both GROS and ZRS, recommended for critical data scenario. If you're working in a government firm or you're working in all these big organizations like banks, and they want to use the storage account to store their backup files, you have to go for geo zone redundant storage because it's suitable for critical data scenarios. So at the end of the day, if there's any data lost, you can always recover it back. But since this is a lab, so I'll just go for local. So I don't finish my money. So we'll now go to the next tab, which is advanced. So in the advanced tab, here, you can enable SFTP. So SFTP now is secure file transfer protocol. So if, for instance, you have some backend systems that needs to be copying files to your storage account, so you can enable SMTP so that the copy of files will be secured. So that's one use case of SMTP. But in this case, we don't really need to enable SMTP. So to enable SMTP, you need to first of all enable hierarchical namespace.
So your screen is not moving.
Yeah, I mean,
Your
create
screen is
storage
not moving.
accounts.
It's static.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So is anybody?
I said the
What are you
screen is no
seeing?
longer moving.
What are you
It's
seeing? What are
moving
you
but
seeing?
slow. It's moving but slow.
Bro, your screen
What
is
are, you are still
Your
on
screen is
that?
perfect here.
I think that
Sorry.
locally. Okay.
your screen is moving. I think you can end the your this thing and join again. Your screen is moving, Emmanuel.
Okay,
You are
thank you.
trying to create storage account now, like advanced.
Yeah,
So
Yeah,
your screen is
exactly.
moving, bro.
okay, thank you.
Kindly log off and come back. Thank you.
Is your
Thank you.
network? The screen is okay. Check your own network. Emmanuel, your screen is okay, please.
Okay, okay. So for enable hierarchical, for you to enable SFTP, then you have to enable hierarchical namespace. You can see here, it is graded. So there was a scenario I had with one of our customer. So they told us to enable SFTP, and they have already created a storage account. So in that case, we have to we have to enable this hierarchical namespace. That was when I now knew that for you to enable SFTP, you must enable this first. So if we look at it, hierarchical namespace is complemented by data lake storage and two endpoints, enables files and directory semantic, and accelerate big data workflows and enable access control list. So if you enable this, you can use access control list. Why for SFTP enables SSH file transfer protocol for your storage account that allows users to access Blob via SFTP endpoints. So that is one use case of SFTP. So you can give users access to your Blob so that they can copy files to your Blob. So, but for our case, I won't enable it. I'll just leave it. So for access tiers, this is where you define those access tiers that we're talking about: hot, cool, or code. Here we don't have archive. We don't have archive here, but we are going to still check that later. So for hot, it is optimized for frequently accessed data and everyday usage. While for cool, optimized for infrequent access data and backup scenarios. So I'll just leave it as hot. So for Azure files, you can enable network file system. If you enable network file system, for you to enable it, that means you must enable hierarchical namespace. So some of these things, before you enable them, this hierarchical namespace must be enabled. So those are just some features. You can enable manage identity for SMB. So if you enable manage identity for SMB, there is a very good feature that is going to bring to the table because it makes access to your SMB files credential free. So you could use a user assigned manage identity or system assigned manage identity to access your files share. That is an advantage or importance of enabling manage identity for SMB. So if you're using manage identity, that means you don't need username and password because every resource you create in Azure automatically comes with a system assigned manage identity that gets deleted when you delete the resource, just like our mentor Oluwatosi Ajala explained the other time. So once you delete the system, it automatically deletes the system assigned manage identity. But in our own case, I'm just showing us because these are part of security settings you can configure for storage account. So I will leave this part, then I will now go to networking. So for networking, this is where the public access I was talking about, we need to restrict it. So here, public network access, if you enable it, that means you're allowing inbound and outbound access to your storage account, which is not best practice. So it is good this is restricted. Because if you enable this and you say enable from all network here, that means what you are doing is not best practice. You are exposing your organization's data to, you are exposing your organization storage account to the entire public. So it's not best practice. So most times, some organizations, they disable it. If you disable it, it means that if you want to access this storage account, you must use a private endpoint. If you don't use a private endpoint, you cannot access it. So the importance of using private endpoints is that it makes your work more complex because that means for you to access this storage account, you need to connect to a virtual machine that is on the same network with the storage account. So we are going to see that. So if they are on the same network, then you can access it. So let's see private endpoint like this. So if I enable private endpoint for this storage account now, it's going to give this storage account a network interface. And with network interface, what it means is that I need a virtual network. So all the resources in that virtual network will be able to communicate with this storage account because the storage account now have a private endpoint. So that is an advantage of private endpoint, meaning that you are limiting the access to only your virtual network, not the entire public, which is best practice. So I will enable it. I will enable public access, but in a production environment, it is not best practice. So even if you enable public access, you can now come here and say, enable from selected virtual network. Then you select among your virtual network, the one that you want to access this particular storage account, meaning that any resources that must access it, if the person is not on that VNet, the person will not be able to access the storage account. That's just the meaning. You won't be able to access it. So those are part of the network controls. But if you say enable from all network, that means all network. We can see the one in here. Enabling public network access will make these resources available publicly, unless public access is required. Consider using the most restrictive access configuration. So Microsoft is also giving you a warning here because it is not best practice to enable this. So these are part of the things that we need to look at when configuring network protection for our storage account. So in production environment, the best is you disable it, then you use private endpoints. So if I add a private endpoint now, it's going to make our lab longer because I will need to create a VM that is on the same network that will be on the same network with the storage account. So I will just enable from public access, then enable from all network. But in your environment, don't do that if you're in a production environment. So you can do this for test environment or training. But in your production environment, at all costs, disable public network access. So we'll move next to data protection. So data protection is very important because if, for instance, you enable public access and your data got exposed to hackers and they delete your data. So if you enable soft delete for blobs, that means your data will be retained for 7 days. It won't be deleted. You can always go back and restore. So that is the advantage of this. So it's good you enable data protection for your blob storage and also for versioning. Versioning is also very important because it gives you versions of it gives you version control of your blobs. You can always revert back to the previous version, just like we have for OneDrive, where if you create a file now, you store it in OneDrive, it creates versions, version 1, version 2, version 3. If, for instance, you made an error, you can always revert back to the previous version of the file. That's just what this does. So data control is also very important because it enables you to actually protect your data in case of accidental deletion and maybe ransomware attack, different kinds of attack. So you can enable blob change fields. What this does is that it keeps tracks of create, modification, and delete changes to your blob account. So all these things are very important. You enable them when creating your storage account because enabling them gives you more control of your data to protect them. So there are some environments that days to retain, they can increase it to 90. They can increase it to, here now, the highest you can go is 365 days for blob soft delete. So some environments we say 1 year. So for days to retain, this for blob retention. So for container retention now, you can increase it to, let's say, 365. So those are just the settings you can configure for data protection. So now let's go to security. Let's see. So for security now, this is where you can say, okay, require secure transfer for REST API operation, allow enabling anonymous access on individual container. So when creating your storage account, these are the security settings you can configure that will impact your storage account. So here now, enable storage key access. We are going to enable it because we are going to see how we can use the account key to access our storage account. I'm going to do that demonstration. So we are going to see why we are not supposed to expose our storage account key. The next one is allow enabling anonymous access on individual container. So if you enable this, that means all your containers can be accessed by anybody, which is no good. So that is why it's good you uncheck it. So require secure transfer for REST API operations. So for secure transfer now, it means that maybe, for instance, if you have an application that needs to connect to your storage account, the connection must be via secured connection, which is HTTPS. But in one environment that I manage, I saw their storage account. So I checked, I saw that there are some storage accounts that this requires secure transfer for REST API is unchecked, which means it accepts HTTP. I now raised the ticket, like, we need to change this. They were like, there are some applications that they have that does not support HTTPS. So that is why all these things, when creating your storage accounts, you need to discuss with the team that wants to use the storage account to know the applications that will interact with that storage account, if it supports HTTP or HTTPS. So HTTPS is secured. HTTP is not secured. But there are some applications that only support that. So in that case, I was unable to enforce this control. And there was a documentation that was provided to actually, there was an exemption documentation that they sent, okay, based on the application, this, then I left it that way. So in our own case, we'll check it. So default to Microsoft Entra authorization in Azure portal. So this is my environment now. If it's a full cloud-only environment where all my users are in Entra ID, users that will be accessing the storage account are in Entra ID, I can check this so that everything will be controlled by Microsoft Entra ID. So when this property is enabled, the Azure portal authorized requests to blobs, files, queues, and tables with Microsoft Entra ID by default. So that is one advantage of enabling this. So I'll just uncheck it. So for minimum TLS version, so the minimum is version 1.2. So permitted scope for copy operations. If you say from any storage account, that means from any storage account, copy operations can happen from storage accounts in the same Microsoft Entra ID tenant, from storage account that have private endpoints to the same virtual. So depending on the settings you want, because for now it's in preview. It's in preview. So if we look at it here, it says that restrict copy operation from storage accounts that are written to the same Microsoft Entra ID tenant or that have private link to the same virtual network. So basically what this means is that you can create scope for copy operation. So if I say from any storage account, that means I can copy from any storage account. But if I restrict it to from storage accounts in the same Entra ID tenant, that means the storage account I will be able to copy from must be in this my Entra ID tenant. If the storage account is not under this tenant, I won't be able to copy. So you can see from storage account that have private endpoints to the same virtual network. So all these are very good, because if you see from any storage account now, that means if, for instance, this storage account gets compromised, the hacker can copy my files to another storage account. So that is why in enforcing security controls, look at the pain that it will cost you if you are being exploited. So if you always look at the pain, it will make you configure these things. So in our own case, I'll just leave it as from any storage account. Then I'll go to encryption. So for encryption, storage accounts are encrypted by default using Microsoft Managed Key. But if you want to use your own key, which is customer managed key, then you need to configure it. You need to configure your own key using either Key Vault or your own vault management system. So but in our own case, we'll just leave it with Microsoft Managed Key. So for enable support for customer managed keys, so you can select all types. You can select blobs and files. So depending as the case may be, and there's a warning here, this option cannot be changed after a storage account is created. So all these settings now, you can't change them. Like this enable support for customer managed key, you can't change it. So that's why before you create the storage account, you need to ask your supervisor that how far should we enable it for all service types, or you read up the effect of enabling this. Then if it's good or suits your organization, you can enable it. So in that case, I will just review and create so that we can create our first storage account. Then we can see some of the settings we can configure. So there is a missing information in the basic tab. So let me go to the basic so I can check the missing information. So it's saying that preferred storage type. So for preferred storage type, let me go for Blob. Let me go for Azure Blob storage. So most times once you get error like that, just go back, check the error, you'll be able to resolve it. So we'll just allow it to create. So I'll click on create so we can create our first storage account. So while deployment is in progress, if you have any question, you can just ask so that we can start answering some of our questions before our time elapses. Let me check the chat if I can see any questions on the chat. Azure Storage Mover is suitable for, wow. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you. That's correct. So deployment has succeeded. Deployment has succeeded. So now that the deployment has succeeded, I'll go to the resource so that we can see our storage accounts that we just created. I'll close this guy here and leave it. So this is our storage account. We can see those settings that we enabled. Sub delete 365 days, container sub delete 365 days, public network access enabled, public network access scope from all network. This is not good. It's good you disable public network access by all means in your environment. Private endpoint connection 0 because we did not configure any private endpoints. Require secure transfer for REST API enabled. Storage account key access enabled. Minimum TLS version 1.2. Infrastructure encryption disabled. So after creating your storage account, you will see in the overview page, you will see all the settings that you configured. So in our own case, let's now look at the data storage we have in storage accounts. So like we're saying on the slide, you can use it to store. You can use container, you can use file share, you can use queues, and you can use tables. So I've not used queue and table before, but I've used file share and I've used container. So I'll show us how we can upload files and how we can secure access to those files. So I'll open containers. So it comes with some default containers like logs and blob change fields. So the reason why we have this was that when I was configuring the storage account, I enabled block change fields and I enabled logs. So in that case, it's storing those logs here for me. So I'm going to add a new container here. I'll call it MS Naija. MS Naija dump. Then I'll click create. So I can create the container. So I've created the container now. So let me open the container. So this is MS Naija dump. If I want to add a directory inside this container, I can, but I'll just leave it as this MS Naija dump. So adding a directory is just like adding a folder, but I'll just leave everything to be here. So I'll just upload a file here. I'll click on upload so that I can upload a file to this container. So I'll browse. So which file should I upload? Let me upload my signature. Let me upload our logo. Let me upload. Which other thing again should I upload? Let me just upload these ones. Then let me click open. So you can upload multiple files to your storage accounts. So where is Azure Portal again? So it says there that 3 files have been selected. Copilot PNG, MS Naija PNG, OE signature. So I'll click on upload. So I've uploaded these three files here. Copilot to MS Naija. So you'll be seeing the status as you upload them. So it will be showing. So let's just wait for this one to upload. So I can just hold on for it to complete, or I can close. So if I refresh this page, so it's not, it's uploading. So I'll just give it some time. So if I open my signature now, so this is the URL to access this image. So if I copy this URL and I put it on a tab here, and I hit enter, you see, it's telling me that public access not permitted. Public access is not permitted on this storage account because we disabled anonymous public access for Blob, for containers. So that is why I'm unable to access this particular URL file. So if I want to access it, what I can do is I can generate a shared access signature to access this particular file. So I can just come here, click on generate. Then when generating, I can either use account key or user delegation key. I'm going to talk about this. So I just want us to get the fact that because anonymous blob access is disabled, we cannot have access to the files we upload to our storage account using the URL. So I'll just come here. I'll just leave it on key 1. Then for stored access policy, I don't have. So for permission here now, you can scope your permissions. I can see read, add, create, write, delete, permanent delete. So you can see how you can restrict permissions to a particular file. So I can just like leave it at read. Then for start date, I can give it maybe like, I can say day before yesterday. Then I'll just leave the expiry date to, let's say, tomorrow. So this is just the way you can generate shared access signature for accessing your files. So I can leave it at HTTPS alone. Then I generate the SAS token. So we can see the SAS token I generated. So as it is, if I want to access this URL, once I copy it and put it on the browser, let's see, I can access that image. So this is my signature. So remember, the advantage of using shared access signature is that it expires. So you can have a start time and an expiry time. So for this now, maybe for instance, I want to give somebody access to this picture for a particular time. And aside that, this person only has read access to this image. So even if, for instance, because you see this URL is very long, so there are a lot of things that hackers can do with this URL. So from this URL, some of them can even have access to my storage account. But even if they have access to my storage account from this URL, the only permission they have to my storage account to that URL, to that is just read. So if I give them add, create, write, that means they'll be able to do a lot of things. So that is one use case of this, but I'm going to close it so that we are now going to go to the storage account settings. So remember, part of the data storage options, we have container. I've created a container and I've uploaded files to the container. So if I come back to the data storage, we have classic file share. So for now, I don't have any file share here. So what I'll do is I'll create a new file share. I'll click on create file share. So if you're not muted, kindly mute your mic. Moderator, please help me mute that person. I'll say MS Naija file share. So I'll leave the default size to 20,000 maximum capacity. I'll just leave it as 100 TB. So for backup, I will uncheck this because I don't want the file share to backup. So I'll just leave it. But in a production environment, always enable backup because it protects your classic file share from accidental deletion or modification with granular restore at scale. So always enable backup options in your own production environment. So I'll click on create. So I can just create the file share so that I can explain to us. So now we have created our first file share here. So I can connect to this file share on my system here, and I can also upload files to the file share. So let me connect to the file share on my system. So if I want to connect to it, I can, if I have a Linux machine, I can use Linux machine. If I have Mac OS, I can use Mac. So for Windows machine now, I will just select this drive. I don't have any drive for Z. So let me just leave it as Z. So for authentication methods now, this was what I was trying to explain the other time. So if you want to authenticate your file share, if you want to like connect to your file share, you can use storage account key and you can use Active Directory or Microsoft Entra ID. So using storage account key is not the best. And I'm going to tell us why it's not the best. But let's just explore how we can connect to our storage, our file share using storage account key. So most times it's good you use Active Directory or Microsoft Entra. And I'm going to show us how we can configure that. So I'll click on show script so that I can connect to this storage account using this command. So in that case, what I'll just do is I'll copy this whole command. I'll click on copy here, then I'll run it on PowerShell. For this kind of command, I like using PowerShell ISC because of the graphical user interface. So I'll just use PowerShell ISC. So what I'll do is I'll paste that command I copied here. So once I paste it, I'll run the command. So it's testing network connection, waiting for response. Let's see if it's going to connect. So we'll just observe. Okay, credential added successfully. Okay, it's still connecting. So maybe because my network is a bit slow, that's why it's taking time. But once it connects, if I come to my system and I go to this PC, so I have only 2 drives here. So you are going to see the Azure drive here. It's going to be here by it will just appear. So let me just wait for that command to execute. So it has executed. So the credential added successfully. So it's created a Z drive and the provider is file system. So this is the URL like we're talking about during the demonstration that the endpoint always have the name of the storage account, .file, .core, and .windows.net. So I'll minimize this guy, then I'll refresh this. So it's supposed to show. So let me check why it's not showing. So let me collapse network. Let me see. It's supposed to show. So, but overall, that is how to add a storage account to your system. But if you're adding it, take note that you are using your storage account key. Okay, so let's go to our storage account. Since we have explored the storage options, container, classic file share. So if I come to queue now, if you have a messaging application, you can create a queue for it. You can just call it MS Naija. So you click OK. You can create a queue for it. So it will show here, MS Naija queue. And you can add content to it. So you can just add content to the queue. And also for table too. You can create a table. You can just say MS Naija table. Then you OK it. So in that case, you have created a table. So if you open the table, you can see the URL to access the table here, msnigeriatable.code or windows.net. So let's see. Okay, so we have added a table. So now let's go to access keys. Let me explain something about access keys. So if you want to access the access key, you access it from security and networking. So from here, we have key 1 and key 2. So these two keys are very important because if anybody have access to this key, they have access to your entire storage account. I'm telling you, to your entire storage account, including all your containers, all your file share, all your queues, all the tables. That's one of the things that you can use this key for. So in that case, we have to rotate these keys on day-to-day basis. We have to rotate it. And if we must allow applications to connect using this access key, so it's good we use key vaults to create that connection. So nothing will be stored on the application, nothing will be stored on the environment variable. So everything will the connection will just be on the key vault. So that is one good practice you will do if you must use storage account key. So in this case, I want to explore how we can connect to our storage account using storage account key. So I will show the connection string. So this connection string now is what you use to connect to your storage account. So if I copy this connection string now, and I go to Microsoft Azure Storage Explorer. So Storage Explorer is a tool that you download from Microsoft. So you can use it to explore your storage account, just like File Explorer. So if I open File Explorer now, I can see all my files. I can see all the files I have access to. If I open it, I can see projects, I can see different things. So that's just Storage Explorer. So that's File Explorer. So for Storage Explorer, it does the same thing. It enables you to view your storage accounts. So if I'll copy this URL and drop on the chat, so that if you want to download Storage Explorer, you can just go to that URL and download Storage Explorer. So I'll paste it. So I downloaded it and I installed it. So from Storage Explorer now, I want to connect to my storage account using account key. So if I right click on my storage account, I'll say connect to Azure Storage. So let's see. Then it will ask me storage account or service, blob container or directories. So I'll select storage account because I want to connect to a storage account. And I want to connect using connection string. So I'll do next. Then I'll paste that connection string here. So this is not the connection string. You see the connection string is invalid. Account key or shared access key is required. I'm coming. Let me go and paste the connection string again. Let me go back to the portal. Oh, I was pasting this URL. So I have to copy this connection string here because I'm using key 1. I have to copy it. So I'll come to the connection string here again and paste it. So now it works. So I'll click on next. So once I click on next, I'll click on connect. And let's wait for it to connect. So it is connected now using storage account key. If I collapse blob, I'm going to see those blobs I have. So if I open MS Naija dumps now, you will see those pictures that I uploaded. So let me maximize the screen. So we uploaded all this. You can see them. So you can see that if, for instance, it was an hacker that have access to my connection string, that means the person automatically have access to everything in my storage account. So if I collapse file share, this is the MS Naija file share we created. If I collapse queue, this is the MS Naija queue we created. If I collapse table, this is the tables that are available. This is MS Naija table. So you can see that using the storage account key, it gives someone access to the entire storage account, which is not best practice. And we are told to always use least privilege. So storage account key, if you are using storage account key to give access to your storage accounts, you are not using the principle of least privilege because you are allowing someone to just have access to your entire storage account. So, and one disadvantage of using this storage account key is that if I come to the portal now, since we're using key 1, if I rotate this key, it's going to affect that connection. That means the connection will not work again once I rotate this key. So if I go back to Storage Explorer and I right click on this guy and I say refresh, it won't have connection to that particular storage account because I've disabled. You see, nothing is here. Authorization error because I've already rotated the key. So most times using a storage account key gives you access to the entire storage account. So I'm going to detach this. So we are going to explore how to use shared access signature to give access to a particular storage medium in a storage account. So I will go back to Azure Portal. Then from security and networking, we have what we call shared access signature. So I'll open shared access signature. So with shared access signature, remember storage account, if you want to use storage account, it gives access to everything, all the services, blob, files, queue, and table, just like we saw on the demonstration. But in this case, I want to only give access to blob. So I will uncheck files, uncheck queues, uncheck table, check objects, check containers, check service. But in terms of the service type, I only want blob access. So in this case, I will uncheck create, uncheck add, uncheck delete, uncheck write, uncheck immutable storage, uncheck permanent delete. So if, for instance, now maybe you have a developer and the developer wants to use your storage account to store pictures or files, and you want to give the developer like a connection to your storage account using shared access signature. Of course, you know that the application don't need to have deletes. It don't need to have create. It don't need to have updates. It only need read and list so that it should just read and list. So that is where shared access signature comes in. But if you give your developer access to the storage account key, it means that they have access to all the services, blobs, files, queue, and table, and they can do anything regarding in that storage. But with shared access signature, you can configure it in such a way that you can give list permissions like, okay, list, read. If I say write now, it means that the person can upload files. So the disadvantage of write is that the hacker can upload a malware to your storage account that can come and corrupt your data. So that's why all these things, you need to painstakingly check them so that you don't go and overgive access that you're not supposed to give in terms of in terms of permissions. So Blob versioning permissions, I'll leave that. So for read writes, I'll leave all these settings. So for the time, this is where you can scope the time. So if I want to give the access for like, let's say 1 week, 1 month, 3 months, this is where I can scope it. So I'll just give it to I'll say 28. Then the end time, I will increase it to 7. Should I leave it like this? Okay, it's fine. So don't mind my time zone. My time zone is Abu Dhabi because my system, that's the default time. So I will leave the connections to only HTTPS. Then for key signing now. So if you are creating a shared access signature, it still works with your access key. So that means you can choose among any of the keys that you want to use to sign this signature. So if I use key 2, that means key 2 will be used. So most times, if for instance, you want to, let's say, do some operations in your storage account and you want to rotate the key. So most times you can come here and change the key to key 2 and you rotate key 1. So that's one use case of these 2 keys. So maybe for instance, you want to perform maintenance activities on key 1, you can switch your application to key 2. So I will leave key 1 so that I can generate the shared access signature. So I'll click on generate. So in that case, it gives me connection string, it gives me SAS token, it gives me Blob service URL. So what this means is that I'm only connecting to Blob alone. So the difference between account access key and shared access signature is that account key gives you access to the entire data storage, container, file share, queue, and table. But shared access signature can streamline it to a particular service. So you can call it service SAS. It can streamline it to a particular service, like, okay, Blob, files, queue, or table. So I'll click, since we have already generated, I want us to connect to this, to access this container now using this particular Blob service URL. So I'll copy the URL. I'll go back to Storage Explorer. Then I'll right click and say connect. So if you ask me, what do I want to connect to? So I'll just select this guy. Then I'll say shared access signature. Then I'll do next. So service URL. So let me go back to Azure. Let me see if it was the service URL I copied. So I'll copy the URL again. Then I'll come back here and paste it. Then I'll do next. I'll do connect. So once it connects, you can see that it only gave me access to the Blob. It didn't give me access to file share, table, and queue, which is best practice. So if I open this MS Naija now, I'm going to see those images here. Let's say, for instance, the company sacked me and they say I should leave, that they don't need me again. And I now say, okay, let me delete everything they have there. Because the permission I have to this Blob does not allow me to delete, I'll be unable to delete. If I click on delete here and say also delete Blob snapshot, you know some people are wicked. So they will delete the file and also delete the snapshot. Snapshot is like backup. So let me even say I'm not wicked. I will leave this delete snapshot and say yes. So you can see that queue deletion. So let's see if it's going to delete. So you can see that our permissions is working. So it did not allow me to delete because I don't have the required permissions to delete any file from that particular storage account. So this is why all these things, they are very important. They are important you configure them because people can be wicked. You just go and delete things that they are not supposed to delete. So here, because if I go back to Azure, we can see here that the permission I gave was just read and list and nothing more. I did not give write, I did not give delete. If I give delete now, that means as that guy just click on delete like this, don't delete everything. Imagine it's an hacker that have access to your environment and from the person now, maybe from your website or something, they now have access to this your SaaS URL. The person will say, hey, thank God. And you see that you don't need password. All you just need is just this URL, which makes it very risky. That means you need to configure the settings to restrict on your data. This data now could be maybe financial data, company financial data for the last 10 years. Somebody can just come here and delete it. Imagine somebody deleting company financial data for the last 10 years. That means the company will now have to be thinking, how much do you make this year? And God forbid for them, they don't have backup. Everything is gone. So that is why these permissions, we need to be intentional about these permissions because it's good. So we have explored how to create a shared access signature. So because we're using key 1 as our signing key, so if I come here, if I go to access key and I rotate key 1, it's going to affect the connection. So I'm going to rotate it so that we're going to see that rotating the key affects the connection to the storage account. So let me check. So I've rotated key 1 now. So if I come back to the portal here, so if I refresh this connection here, let me say refresh. If I refresh again, if I open this blob now, you'll see that they'll tell me that I cannot access it, authentication error, because I'm using that key. That is one disadvantage of using accounts key, because once you rotate the key, all the shared access signature that you created with that key is going to stop working. Your developers will just call you. Users are complaining that they cannot view pictures, they cannot do this, they cannot do that. Then you will now give them the new URL. They will now upload it. And once they upload it, everything will now be fine. So that is one disadvantage of key rotation. And most times, keys are being rotated during maintenance window. Everybody will be aware we are rotating the key today. This is the reason why we are rotating it. So we'll close this guide because we know why it is happening. So now, let me now go back to Azure Portal. So here now, the shared access signature we created gave access to the entire, we selected Blob and we saw all the blobs we have, including, we saw all the blobs we have, including the, like if I come to container now, the permission we gave was to our container. So we saw everything. We saw our logs, we saw our blob change field. So now, if for instance, you want to give someone access to a particular container instead of the whole containers you have, let's say our website team, why will I give them access to logs, blob change fields? I want to only give them access to MS Naija because MS Naija logo is here. So I want them to use our logo on the website so that they can upload the logo URL there. That's why I'm giving them this particular logo. So in that case, you use what we call shared access tokens for that, so that you can give access on the container level, on a like, how will I even put it? You give access on a file level instead of the whole container level. So in that case, you can use account key or user delegation key. So this account key now is being signed by your access keys, either key 1 or key 2. But the difference between account key and user delegation key is that this one is not signed by any of your keys, either key 1, it's not signed by any of your account keys. This one, if you use it, once you rotate the keys, it's going to like stop the connection. But if you use user delegation key, even if you rotate the key, because it's not using the key, you'll still be working. So I'll create an account SaaS so that we can see how we can create an account SaaS to access just a like a blob in the container. So I'll just use key 1. Then for stored access policy, you can create your access policy before you even create your policy. So let me just go to access policy so that I can create a policy here. So here, if I want to create a policy, so this policy is just like, I want to like define the permission or the scope a user we have to the container. So I'll click on add policy here. Then I'll give the policy a name. Let me say MS Naija web policy. Then for permission now, I will say read and list. I don't want to give delete, write, create. So all these things have their meaning. So if you want to add, if you select add, that means the person can add. If you select create, that means the person can create. If you select write, that means the person can write. If you select delete, that means the person can delete. So I'll leave read and list. So for start time and end time, so I'll select on Tuesday, then I'll select on Wednesday. So I'll leave everything like this. Then I'll click on OK. So the advantage of this policy is if I want to update the expiration time, so I can always come here and edit it. So if I come to shared access signature now, so let me save it. So if I come to shared access signature and I click on account key, so I'll see all the policies I have. So I have MS Naija web policy. So I'll select MS Naija web policy. You see that it automatically pick the expiration time and the permissions I selected. So that is the advantage of this one. So you can use a policy across different permissions. So as it is now, I'll just leave. But if, for instance, I say none, that means I have to create the policy again. So I'll just select MS Naija policy. Then I'll click on HTTPS. I'll leave it at HTTPS only. So another thing again, you can have allowed IPs here. If, for instance, you want to allow the IP of your Linux machine that you're using to host your application, you can put the IP here so that any IP that is here automatically gain access. So if I come here and check an IP address or range of IP address from which accept requests. So meaning that any IP I had here can accept requests from this shared access signature. So those are use cases that you can see even during exam. They'll ask you all these things. So I'll generate the URL. So we now have the Blob SaaS URL here. So I'll copy it. I'll go back to Storage Explorer so that we can test. You remember this one, we saw all our containers. So let me detach this guy so that we won't be confused. So I'll right click and say connect to storage account. Then I'll say, let me do this guy. I think this is okay. Shared access signature URL. No, this is not the one I used. So let me cancel. Let me right click. Let me say connect to storage accounts. Then let me use blob or directory because I'm connecting directly to a blob. Remember, if I do right click and I say connect to storage accounts and I select this guy, that means I'm connecting to the entire like containers so that I will see the whole containers that I have. But since I want to only access a particular folder in my containers, then I don't need this. So I'll cancel. I'll right click and say connect to storage accounts. Then I'll now do blob or directory because I want to connect to a directory, not the entire container itself. Then I'll paste the blob URL here. Then I'll do next, connect. So you see, let's see, I have access to this guy, MS Naija SaaS. So all these ones, let me see, nothing shows. So all these ones, you won't see anything. So here, the only thing I can see here is just that folder. So this is also another way to enforce this privilege. Instead of you to give people access to see all the containers you have, you can just say, okay, you can only see just specific container. In case you have a big environment where you have a lot of files that you are saving in your storage account, not everybody needs to see everything. There's some people that just need to see what is specific to them. So you can use this to scoop it to a particular container. So if I come to Copilot PNG and I say if I even try to download it, let's see if it will allow me to download it. So let me leave it in downloads folder. Where will I leave it now? No. Let me just create a new folder. Let me say blob test. So let's see if it will allow me to download it. So I was able to download it. So depends on the permission you specify. So if you don't want somebody to be able to download, you can also specify permission to prevent download. But let's try to delete. Let's see if we can delete. Delete. Okay, deletion is blocked, but download is allowed. So if we come back to Azure, so this is our shared access signature. So if I come back to access policy, so we can see the policy we have there. So the advantage of this access policy is that you can always update it. You can change the permissions to any permissions you like. So if I want to update it, I can click on it here, then say edit. I can always edit it and increase the time to a longer time or a shorter time, and also increase the permissions, read and list. So I can, if I want to add, maybe for instance, my CTO told me that, let's give them permission to create. I'll just select create and cancel it. So those are ways and advantage of this particular stuff. So there is another thing here, which is for data protection, which is used for container retention. So from here, user-defined policy applies to a container for retaining the data in all blobs in the container in a non-modification delete protected state. So with this, if you enable this, immutability, like the way me I understand immutability is something that cannot change. Something that cannot change, like it doesn't change. So if you enable this, if you add a policy for immutability, that means you want your data to be retained, non-modified, and it will be on a delete protected state. That is an advantage of this. So this is a policy you can still add on your container level. So all these are when you are adding more layer of protection to your storage account. So let's explore the other type of shared access token, which is user delegation key. So this user delegation key now, even if you rotate what are they calling it? The keys, it will not affect it because the sign-in doesn't need key. So if I collapse this user delegation key and it doesn't work with permissions. So if I go to account key now, you can select your permissions. You can select stored access permission. But with user delegation key, you have to create it here. You cannot have access to create the permissions, then edit at the end of the day. So I will only leave it at read and list because those are one of the best list privilege that you can have. So I'll go back to 28. Then I'll increase this one to maybe 5. Then I'll generate the SaaS URL. So it has been generated. So let me go and connect to it using this URL. So let me go to storage account. Right click on storage accounts, connect to storage accounts, then blob or directory, connect using then paste, then do next, connect. So it's going to connect. And once it connects, we are going to explore something. The request is not authorized to perform this operation using the stuff. Here you get. So that's just the way it works. So it's not authorized. So if I select it, so no data. So, but basically the key difference between the two of them is that if I come here now to user delegation, it doesn't get signed by the account key. But for account key, you need to select the particular key. So you can call this account SAS, and you can call this user delegation SAS or user delegation key. So that's just the way it is. So let me go back here. So now we have seen for containers, we have seen how we can give access to our containers using this privilege, and also like list, read, instead of giving somebody permissions to delete. So another thing again we need to take note of, just like our mentor, Mr. Oluwatosi Ajala, he showed us the other time. So from access control, if you want to give somebody access to blobs, there are some blob permissions that you can give. So if I come here now and I act as if I want to add a policy, maybe I have a staff that I want to have access to this storage account. So from the storage account level, you can also give permissions too. So I can say blob. So let's see permissions that are scoped to blob. So let me search for blob. So for blob now, we can see permissions that are scoped to blob. So if, for instance, you want to give somebody permission and you want the person to be able to generate user delegation key, then you can give the person storage blob delegator, because you may have developers in your team and you don't want them to be disturbing you all the time, that they want to generate this, they want to generate that. You can give them these permissions, storage blob delegator. It allows for generation of user delegation key, which can be used to sign tokens. So your developers can have this permission on a particular storage account, meaning that you're just giving them permission on the storage account pin. So we now have storage blob data reader, allows for read access to storage blob containers and datas. So if you want to give somebody read access to storage blob containers and datas, you can give it. But remember, this one is not scoped. You're giving them read access to everything. But with account SAS or shared access, with account SAS, you can give them access to a particular container instead of everything. But this one, you're giving them access to all your containers and data. So storage blob data owner allows full access to storage blob containers and data. So these are permissions we can also give from the storage account level. So I'll just close this. So it just called to my attention. I said, let me show us that too. So if I come down to file share, so we can see those options that we can also explore for file share. So let me wait for this to load. I think we created a file share. So here now, we did not configure identity base. So soft delete is 7 days. Security is maximum capability. So which is recommended, which is okay. So if I pull out this guy now, we are going to see those options we saw on this slide, which is enabling identity source for file share. So if you want to enable Active Directory Domain Services connection, that means you need more technical work to be done. And one thing I like about Microsoft is that there's always a video that you can watch to do it. So if you want to like set up Active Directory Domain Services authentication to access your file share. So what this means is that for you can create permissions. You can give permissions to a security group of users in your Active Directory so that they can have access to a particular file in the file sync in the cloud. So you can use these options. So the settings are here. Step 1, enable Active Directory authentication. Step 2, enable shared level permission. This shared level permission now, you can enable it to assign permissions to groups. So for assign directory or file level permission, you can assign permission to a file, just like we did for container. You can assign permission to a file, and you can mount file share using AD credentials. You know, when we're trying to mount that file share, we used account key to mount it, which I was saying that is not best practice. So it's good instead of using account key or instead of using account key, you use Azure Active Directory Authentication or Entra ID Domain Services, which is the best. Because if you don't use it, you are using account key. If anything happens and your account key gets exposed, you see what will happen. They will see everything in your environment. Imagine that storage account is where you are storing treasury information. What happens? It's gone. They will delete everything or they will copy it and encrypt it. You will not be begging them for access, which we don't pray for that. So we'll close this. Then we check the settings to enable Entra Domain Service. So this one is very easy. If you want to enable it, just click on the checkbox here, you save it. This one is not hard. So I'll just uncheck this. So if you want to use Microsoft Entra Kerberos, you click on setup. You'll see all the settings here. Allows user to connect to Azure File Share over the internet without requiring line of sight of domain controller. If you want to use Azure Active Directory Domain Services, there must be a connection between your domain controller and the network that your file share is deployed. But this one, you don't need that. So discard. So that's part of the security settings you can configure for file share access. You can streamline it to Microsoft Entra Kerberos. You can streamline it to Microsoft Entra Domain Services. You can streamline it to Active Directory Domain Services by enabling an identity source. So this, if you enable identity source, that means you don't need storage key. You don't need account key again. You can just use any of the identity source that you have enabled. So let me close this guy because configuring all this now will take us will take a while. So there's no, let me not even look at it. So if we come to networking now, those settings we're talking about, public access, you can also change it. After creating your storage account, if you want to change it, you can come to enable from all network. You disable it. You can disable it. But this is what it's saying. Disabling public network access will make this resource not available publicly. If that's what you want, you proceed. If that's not what you want, you click on cancel. So that's just it. So depending on your own configuration, you can come here and associate a security parameter. You can use resource settings, virtual network, IP, and exceptions. So if you come to private endpoints, you can create a private endpoint. Creating private endpoints is very easy. So it will ask you, you select a resource group, then you have to put the name of your instance. You select the network interface that you want, then you select your region. So let me just see the name of the instance. Let me give it MS Naija. So as I'm typing it, it's picking the network interface. So what private endpoint does is that if you are creating private endpoint for any of your resource, it automatically gives that your resource network interface. So with network interface, that means other resources in your environment can communicate with it. They are on that virtual network. That's a very simple definition of private endpoint. Your system now that you have, it has network interface that if you go to your office, if your office, they still use LAN. So if you connect your LAN to your network interface, if you connect the local area network to your network interface, then you can communicate with other systems in your environment. You can communicate to your domain controller. So the same thing applies to any resource you enable private endpoint. It's like you are enabling network interface for that resources so that it can communicate with resources on the same VNet. So I'll just click on next to resources. So for resources here, I was too fast. Let me go back. So for resources, you can select the target resources. So now you can enable private endpoints for Blob, table, queue, files, web, and DFS. So me now in my own case, what am I enabling private endpoints for? If I want to enable it for Blob, I click Blob. If I want to enable it for table, but most times it's enabled for Blob. That means you can create more because you can select two. You can select file, you can select Blob at the same time. That means if you want to enable private endpoints for Blob access, you create it. If you want to enable for file access, you create it. So if I go next now, this is where we will now select a virtual network instance. So it automatically pick this VNet. So it's saying that the selected subnet managed instance has a delegation and cannot be used. Has a delegation. So there is a delegation that I need to stop. Because that you remember when we were creating testing user access delegation, like we created a delegation. The permission we created that does not require a key. That is a delegation. So because of that, I need to revoke it before I'll be able to create this private endpoint. So these are the things that we need to take note of also when you want to create private endpoint. But once you just select the virtual network here and the subnets, you are good. So the subnet managed instance has delegation. Okay. So basically you just go next, you select DNS, but I can't go next because of this error. So I'll just leave it. But basically, that is how to create a service endpoint. So network routing, you can select the routing you want. If you want to use Microsoft network routing or internet routing, you can select it. If you want to use public route, you can select it. And if you want to enforce a custom domain, you can also do that. You can put the domain here, like msnaija.com.ng. So you can put it here. You can enforce your domain name, but we can just leave all those settings for now. So, but basically, these are part of the ways you can protect your storage account. So let me go back to the storage account. Let me just use the last 4 minutes to just talk about some other things before we go. So the last thing that I've not showed us is Microsoft Defender for Cloud. So you can enable Microsoft Defender for Cloud to protect your storage accounts, but it is expensive. That's why I don't really like enabling it because they will charge you. And my own money, I need it to do some other things. So if I want to enable Microsoft Defender for Cloud now, these are the protection it's going to do. Microsoft Defender for Storage detect threats on your storage workloads and data, including malicious access, data exfiltration of sensitive data, and malware upload. So if, for instance, an hacker gains access to my storage account and they want to upload malware, if Microsoft Defender for Storage is enabled, it will stop it because it will remediate it immediately. Like the malware will not be able to go through any of my resources. But the price is $10 per storage account, meaning that if I enable this, they will bill me $10 immediately for this storage account. And I want to save my money. Just like our mentor always say that nothing is free on Azure. You pay for everything. So I don't want to enable it. But if you enable it, you can see the features there. Sensitive data threat detection. It will detect any sensitive data. Then on upload of malware scanning, this is what they will charge you, $0.15 per GB scanned. So you see that if you're in a big environment and you're always scanning for malware upload, if you calculate this money times a lot of files you have, times a lot of resources, storage accounts, see the money will be big. So those are the things you also need to put in place. So Microsoft Defender for Cloud can help you detect threats on your storage workloads and data, including malicious access, data exfiltration of sensitive data, and malware upload. So all these things we are talking about is how you can protect storage accounts from attacks, which we saw as access key here. So with access key gives access to your entire storage account. So we can see here, access keys authenticate your application request to this storage account. But it is not best practice because if you use access key, that means you are giving them access to your entire storage account, which is not best practice. So you can also use front door and CDN. But all these ones are way, way advanced. And in the upcoming sections, we are going to learn how we can configure Azure front door and content delivery. So those are just the things you can see. So for data lifecycle management, you can also configure data lifecycle management. You can add a rule for data lifecycle management. You can create the rule name, create versions, just to ensure that your data are well managed. So for configurations now, this is where you can change any configurations you want to change. So for performance, after creating the storage account, you cannot change it. But for connectivity, you can change it from IPv4 only to dual stack. For secure transfer required, you can disable it. If maybe you have an application that does not support HTTPS, it only supports HTTP, you can disable it. For manage identity for SMB, you can enable it. If maybe you want to use Entra ID for authentication. So allow storage account key access. If you don't want, so if you disable this, that means storage account key. If somebody wants to use storage account key to access your storage account, it will not work. That's the advantage. So it's good to use Azure policy to disable this. If you don't have any connections that requires storage account key, so you disable it. But before you disable it, you ensure that most of your applications are not using storage account key to connect. So those are the things, not that on Monday you just go to your office, you can disable it. Your developers will just come after you like, our applications are not working. So those are the things. Minimum TLS. You can also check it if you want to disable it. So I think that's all for today. I'll be handing over to the moderator. But if you have any question, you can ask. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Emmanuel, for an absolutely amazing session, an expected amazing session. Please, cheers for Emmanuel, claps for him. He did an absolutely fantastic work there. Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah. So, I have dropped the attendance in the income message. So please fill out the attendance. Please mute your mic if you're not muted. Fill out the attendance. You know how important they are to tracking who attended or who did not. Yeah. So give me a moment.
Okay. It's like there's no question. That means we understand everything. If you have question, you can ask. I'm not here alone. So we
Okay.
have our mentor here
I
also.
post a
So you can
question on the
ask.
chat, please.
All right.
Okay.
Let me check that. Okay, there's a question on the chat. Do we need to enable Defender for storage manually on each storage account, or can we use Azure policy to automatically deploy and enforce Defender for storage access across our environments?
Yeah,
Across our
that's a
environment.
very
Yeah.
that's a
Please
very
go ahead,
brilliant
Emmanuel.
question. Yeah, that's a very brilliant question. Yes, you can use Azure policy but I've not used it before. But I know that in creating your resources, if you use Azure policy and you set it to audit, or you set it to if you set it to audit, that means it will check your environment. Any storage accounts that does not that Microsoft Defender for storage is not enabled, it will flag it and tell you that you need to enable it. And if you set it to deny, that means it will automatically deny creation of any storage account without Microsoft Defender for cloud. So, but for remediation, I may need to check if maybe you can use Azure policy to automatically maybe deploy or enforce the settings. So, okay. So Azure policy is good. It's good. Just like our mentor, Oluwatosi Ajala, has dropped there. So you don't need to enable Microsoft Defender for storage manually. So you can use Azure policy. So you can use Azure policy to enable it. And you can also set it as a standard in such a way that any resource you are creating, you can create a policy to deny creation of new resources that does not have Microsoft Defender for storage enabled. So has that answered your question?
Yes, thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Any other
Okay, thank you
question?
for that. Yeah. Any other
Okay.
questions? You have the floor, guys. Any other questions? Any other questions? Okay, so in the absence of no questions, hi Emmanuel, is there any other thing you need to cover before rounding up the session?
Okay, so I just want to, I'll stop the recording. I just want to show
Okay.
us, I just want to show us something.